back to more Cake Guess One Badass Set of Art. I'm your girl Jelena, and today I'm going to show you guys how I made this cute little Mickey cake. And I got my Mickey ears on. Can you see them? First things first, before we begin, a few announcements, because I'm trying to keep you guys updated on what I do. I am going to do a new project. Let's start from the beginning. I have been a Disney fan from the beginning of time. And at the end of the day, who hasn't? And if you don't like Disney, I don't know what's wrong with you. Something's wrong with you. I mean, something's wrong with me, but something's definitely wrong with you. But I've also been reading, well, I finished reading already. Robert Iger's book, The Ride of a Lifetime. He is the CEO. He's been the CEO of the Walt Disney Company for 15 years. And I just read his book, and which has made me obsessed all over again with Disney. Not all over again, but like when I obsess about something, I obsess. Like I have to dig for information, and I want to know whys and who's and what if and what's the story. Like tell me everything. And I thought, what a great project to do where I make a Disney cake. Well, I make this the year of Disney cake. So basically my goal is to make at least 1 to 2, minimum 1. I have to make at least 1 Disney something edible each month for the year. And I'm gonna go in the order in which the character was created. So obviously the first one is Mickey. And I thought how perfect to do this Mickey Mouse cake for little baby Cristo. He's turning 3. Who's Cristo? Nobody. I made him up just so I can make this cake for you. You're welcome. So if you're excited to go on this journey with me of making a Disney themed cake, and when I say Disney theme, I don't mean just original characters. I mean all of Disney, of what they own, of who they own, because you know they own a lot of entities now. Marvel, they own some Fox things like The Simpsons and stuff like that. So be ready. Before we get started, make sure you've hitting the notification bell and you're subscribed to the channel. Notification bell will update you every time I upload, so that way you can catch the videos as soon as I put them out. But if you want to see them even ahead of time, you can become part of my HBIC crew Facebook group, where it used to be my Patreon. I still have that, but I'll be transferring everything over. You can become part of the HBIC group, where we do daily chit chats of what's going on in everybody's life and how we're doing in our cake world. And also you get a bunch of other goodies, like getting a pricing guide for all the cakes that I do. You get to see the behind the scenes sketching that I do, like this sketch that I did. And I go over all of those, like the thinking process of how I come up with the ideas of my cakes. So that way, because I know a lot of people ask like, how do you come up with these ideas? Or I'm not even inspired. Or so I go through that process and just kind of telling you guys what I do, and maybe it can help you out a little bit better on your cake world journey, or whatever sweets world that you're in at the moment. Okay, so let's get started. So what I first did is I grabbed some styrofoam balls, and they're all different sizes. So I went ahead and grabbed some styrofoam balls, and what you want to make sure you do is when you're covering your styrofoam balls in fondant, you don't roll out the fondant to cover it, because what I found is that when you roll out the fondant and then pick it up to cover it, it doesn't smooth as easily at the bottom part to kind of smooth all of that out. You know what I mean? Like to smooth all those wrinkles out. What I found is that you just take a big globber of fondant and you flatten it with your hand and make it nice and smooth, and then you put it on top and you smush it down. Now for me to be able to get the fondant to adhere to the styrofoam, I just used a little bit of shortening that I rubbed all around all of the styrofoam balls. And then while I'm smushing down this, you know, thick piece of fondant, it's starting to spread, and I'm not worried too much about smoothing. I'm just really worried. So I'm worried about trying to cover it. So I just want to make sure it's covered, and then I can always go back and smooth it. And once you just take that fondant all the way down, you go ahead and tear off anything that's left over at the bottom, and then smooth it all around. And then you can do that for all of the styrofoam balls that you have. The next thing I did is I went ahead and rolled out some black fondant, and I used some circle cutters for the ears, and I cut out the appropriate size. You just want to kind of play around with that and look at the sizes of your circles versus the size of your styrofoam ball that you're using. I've linked some down below that I use to help you out. When you roll out your black fondant, you want to roll it out pretty thick, because what you want to do once you got it rolled out in the circle cut, use some wire that I've dipped a little bit in water, and then I squeeze it through. I squeezed it through the ear, you know, up the ear. I squeezed it up the ear, but I made sure I stopped a little over halfway, so that way it didn't poke out through the top. And I did that for all of my ears. So I set them in the oven with the light of the oven on only. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go hit the eye at the top, okay? Or I've linked it down below too. Now, when it came to the toppers of the heads of the Mickeys, I wanted to make sure before I handled them anymore that they were completely and fully dry. I then didn't show this on camera, but what you want to do is get some sort of like dowel or pointy thing and stick it through the bottom, so that way you can stick like your wire or your dowels in it, so when you go to stick it in the cake. Okay, so you want to make sure you did that. And then I thought it would be really cute for the topper part to have the birthday boy's name, Cristo, and then one of the other toppers of the head, or like a smaller one, would have like the age, number 3. Now, moving on to Mickey Mouse himself. I first cut out my ears. I knew what size I needed. I cut out my ears. I did the same exact thing, stuck the wire in those. So then what I did is I went ahead and started from the bottom going up. I went and created the cute little yellow shoes for Mickey, and I just rolled it out in a piece of fondant and rolled it in my hand. And so I did that for the 2 shoes, and then using my thumb I pressed down on one side, and then I also poked a little hole at the top so I can fit his legs in. So then I also rolled out some black fondant into like long snake-like shapes. So in order for me to get my Mickey to stand up all on his own and I don't have to worry about it, now you can use one of 2 things. You can use toothpicks, which I didn't have none, and I didn't want to have to leave the store to go pick up some toothpicks. Or you can just use some floor wire, which I have a lot of. So I'm using my floor wire. So I stuck some floor wire in my styrofoam, and don't comment how dirty my styrofoam is. I know, all it is a piece of styrofoam that I use over and over again when I make toppers. So all you see on there is just a bunch of fondant stuck on there from the previous toppers that I've done. Like, I just have a designated topper styrofoam dummy cake that I can stick my toppers in whenever I make them, okay? And no, I don't try my best to pull off all of the fondant because I don't care. Because it's like, who cares? It's just fondant. Like, relax. Don't come for me in the comments, okay? Jeez Louise. I can already see people commenting like, how dare she? Jeez. Okay, moving on. So I just grabbed my designated styrofoam, and I stuck some of the wire in the shoes where the legs go. And once I stuck the legs through, you want to make sure you twist it down. Don't just pull it down, because then what you're going to do is pull your fondant from each other and it's going to break. You want to twist it down until you got it nice and snug in the shoe. And there's a f***ing dog barking. The disrespect. I'm filming here. I'm kind of famous. Anyways, moving on. So I stuck my legs on. and then I wanted to move on to the body. For his shorts, I just used a piece of red fondant, and again I started that with rolling the fondant in my hand to get it nice and smooth, and then I started smushing it in the shape a little bit and smoothing it down, and then I cut it to the approximate height that I wanted and length that I wanted the pants to be. Then I also grabbed a piece of black fondant to make his tummy, and I just adhered all that together just with water. Use one of my tools to stick up where the legs holes would be. Oh, I forgot to tell you, use Tylose in all of your fondant, okay? All of the fondant for the ears, for the heads, and all the fondant for your Mickey Mouse. I'm using Tylose, okay? So that helps harden your fondant. And I know y'all gonna be like, well, why don't you just use gum paste? What happens is when you use gum paste and you work with it too long in the world, it hardens like a rock. And then I'm like, shoot, I have legs, but I can't make the body because now my gum paste has hardened too fast. So I don't like using gum paste for that reason. Again, like I said, I took the body, which was a black piece of fondant, and rolled that up, and I wanted to make sure I got to a good height with it too, and then a height and width of the body I wanted, and attached that with water, and I set that aside for a little bit and I let that dry. And then once I felt like it was good enough to handle, it wasn't thoroughly dry, like the outside was really hard but the inside I know was still a little bit moist, then I went ahead and stuck those two pieces together on the legs and pushed that down. So let me tell you about the hands. So the way that you want to do the hands, again, a rolled up piece of fondant, rolled up in your hand as a little white ball, and then take your thumb and push down on one side just like you did the shoe, right? Now, for this Mickey, his hands are kind of clutched, not clutched, is that the word, like closed? Kind of like a fist, and on his hips. So I wanted to give the illusion that that was happening, but I also still wanted the indents of his fingers, so I put 2 indents for his hands, but then if you see on the other side, I indented so it looks like his hands were like folded over. Like I did this indent right here. And then I set that aside. I made 2 of those, and I made sure I wanted to make them the same size. And then for his hands, his arms, I rolled that black fondant again, and I set that aside. And I let that sit for maybe a good 5 minutes. Remember, it has Tylose in it. I let it sit for a good 5 minutes. And then I grabbed some wire and I bent the wire in a V shape. And then I stuck those 2 wires in his body. And with the black piece of fondant that's going to initially be his arms, I slid it straight down. So if this is I slit a line straight across. I cut it straight down, and then I kind of opened that up a little bit. I added a little bit of water to the wire, and then I did the same thing with the hand. I went and took the hand and I cut a slit down the hand, and I wrapped that up around the piece of fondant too, and I made sure I used water anywhere that I wanted the hand to adhere to the body. And then I went ahead and snugged, like pushed the wire in between that slit so that way it can go into this V shape. So like the fist part was touching his hip, so I made put a little water on his hips there. And then yeah, I just wanted to make sure I hid any of the creases so that way you don't really see them, which normally you want to just pull those to the back. You can definitely like smooth them out a little bit more, so that way like if somebody would see like a 360 of the Mickey, like if they would see the back of him, I can understand why you would want to smooth them out, but you can go ahead and do that too. My Mickey wasn't being seen from the back, so I wasn't really too worried about it. So I did that for both his arms and his hands, and then all I was left with was his head. Now off camera, what I did is I stuck a piece of wire in his body so that way it could hold his head, and I set that aside because it needed to dry. I did not want to sit the head on it, and all that was going to do was like make the body part smush down, and I didn't want that happening. For his head, we start with the basic shape of ball, and then I grabbed some of that cream color for his face and I cut out a little circle, right? And then in that circle I cut out a triangle out of the top of it, and then with my hand I just kind of rounded off that triangle, and not round off the triangle, but round off the tips of where I cut the triangle, just so it can be a little more like heart shaped. You can definitely use a heart if you want to, but I didn't have a heart that matched the size that I wanted. So if you have a heart shaped cutter that matches the size that you need for his face, then that can work too. So I put that on his face, but I also cut the bottom of that circle off, so that way there was like no extra fondant being used that I didn't need. And now for his mouth, what I did was I took a piece of the fondant that was the cream color and rolled it up, and I started to make like a snake-like shape of it. And once I got the width that I want and the thickness of it that I wanted, I laid that across the bottom of that circle that I put on his face. I laid that across the bottom, and I began to slowly pinch for his nose to come out. Just a little bit of nose to come out. I slowly started pinching that up, and then I also at the same time started pushing down the bottom of that fondant for his mouth to kind of open up. And I used some of my tools to help me along the way to kind of get me like a nice little Mickey Mouse smile, and then help me push down so I can put a little red in there for his tongue. I stuck a little piece of black fondant on for his nose. I stuck some black and white fondant for his eyes, and then I stuck a wire through it just so I can have that pre-hole already made, and I stuck it in the oven to harden it. And I just stuck Mickey's head along the wire that I already had pre-stuck into the body. And yeah, and you want to make sure that the wire isn't so tall that it's going to poke out of his head. I stuck that on his body, and then I went and stuck his ears and his head. Again, I just add a little bit of water. Even though your fondant is stiffened and hardened up already, you can still add water to it, and it will tend to like eat at the stiffness and make it sticky and tacky all over again. So that's why I add the water, just so I can get those pieces to adhere to each other. And then I was excited. He was so cute. He was so cute. Now that all my toppers are completed and set aside so they can dry and do their things, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the cake. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me for another tutorial. If you're interested in knowing how much it costs for me to make this cake and how much I would sell it for, go ahead and check out my HBIC squad group on Facebook. The link is down below. It's members only, so make sure you go and check that out. Don't forget to comment below what Disney cake or Disney, whatever sweets creation you would like to see me create for this year. I'm actually really excited about this. I can't wait to show you guys all the cakes I'm gonna make. Moving along, thank you guys, I love you. Oh, follow me on Instagram. Why do I always forget to tell you guys these things? Follow me on Instagram so that way you guys can see what a daily thing I'm doing, you know, and some behind the scenes stuff on my Instagram at Jelena Simpson. Yeah, okay. I'll see you guys later. Bye.